I don't wanna grow up, I'm a curious kid. The world has 100 questions I can play with. So I'll open my arms and eyes and wonder every day till the day I die. No one really knows why gravity exists.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here at Wonderfest in Hop Monk Tavern. My name is Tucker Hiatt. I'm founding director of this Bay Area beacon of science. Tonight's Wonderfest speaker is biophysicist Victor Ortega Jiménez. He's assistant professor of integrative biology at UC Berkeley. Go Bears. Before coming to Cal, Dr. Ortega Jiménez earned his PhD in marine ecology, specifically I think birds, marine birds, at CICESE, cool acronym, CICESE. It stands for Enseñada Center for Scientific Research and Higher Education. Then he did postdoctoral work at Cal, where he received the Monarch Award for the most outstanding postdoctoral proposal. Further postdoctoral work continued at UC Davis and Georgia Institute of Technology, and he became an assistant professor in biology and ecology at the University of Maine. Now Dr. Ortega Jiménez directs UC Berkeley's Ornithopterus lab in organismal dynamics. Please welcome, to discuss how physics redefines nature and what the heck Ornithopterus means, I hope, biophysicist Dr. Victor Ortega Jiménez.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here. And today, I'm going to talk about flamingos. And hopefully you are familiar with these very interesting birds. But they are, if you think in extreme species like thermophils, or some of these water birds that can survive in the space, flamingos are close to that because they live in very hard environments, hypersaline, alkaline that can burn your skin or your eyes, and they are doing fantastic things what they are feeling. So, and today I'm going to try to convince you with some evidence, experimental evidence, and some observations that we did with some engineers, some physicists, and some computational scientists, how flamingos are feeding. And I'm going to tell you in this story that flamingos are predators, as always were, and they are using traps. And these traps are made of fluids. If you think in spiders, they are using spider webs to trap insects. Flamingos are using fluid traps to capture all these swarms of small bacteria and also some branch shrimp. So, and that's the meaning of this, that flamingos are super specialized predators. But before that, I'm going to tell you how I start being familiar with birds and also in love with them. So this is my start in the university. So I started my journey in Mexico. And the first observation during the university was in this small town in Veracruz in a cloud forest. And what inspired me to do research in birds and aerodynamics was this species, the Oropendula montezuma. And you can see the colors. These beautiful colors, the yellow, the brown, the black, and they look like some kind of paradise birds. But one interesting question in that forest is the nest. You can see this long nest that can measure 2 meters long. And the question is how the female made this elongated nest. And the question brings to aerodynamics, because you need to know what is the distance that they are traveling to understand the cost. So, and that was the link to the physics that I started working with birds and the fluids. But my second experience was in the Yucatan Peninsula, and I started working with the orange oriole that is endemic to the Yucatan. And you can see these birds. And at that time, I was interested in behavior, how these birds make nests. But in those days, when I was just walking around all the Yucatan Peninsula, I went to the Rio Lagartos, and it was the first time that I observed flamingos flying. So it was during the morning. I was just getting in the post in that region, and I saw this flock of flamingos flying, and that was just something incredible, you know, that I cannot describe. And that was the first time that I observed flamingos, and that's it, no, in the wild. So then I moved to the border in Sonora, and I started working with migratory birds. And finally, I did my PhD in Ensenada, but I work on an island, in the San Benito Islands. You can see there that they are located in the Pacific. And I work with the Santos murrelets. And all these birds, how they are diving and flying in the sea. I was like some kind of police with these radars, trying to see if the birds are just flying through these radars to measure the speed, you know, and how they were flying. So that was a fantastic experience, you know, working in the field, and especially in the wild, you know, with these beautiful birds. And then that was my field work, you know, like as some naturalist. I'm a biologist. Then I started working with at UC Berkeley, UC Davis, KSU, Georgia Tech, UNC, the University of Maine, and now I'm at Berkeley. And all those were more lab work. No, I started heavily working with fluid dynamicists, with engineers, and trying to understand how animals move in fluids. And now I'm in Berkeley, and so we have this lab I call Ornithopterus, like the Ornithopterus of Leonardo da Vinci. You just put the US. But the idea is that I'm trying to understand how animals fly.
I'm sorry, I raised the issue before. So Ornithopter was the invention that Da Vinci thought he had made to allow humans to fly.
Yes.
Ah, and it was called
after that. But I added the US because Icarus, you know, this idea that this old legend, you know, that was some like a student that was flying with these wings and wax, and he went very close to the sun and he fell in the ocean. So, and that's why I put this idea, because I don't like so much the ownership of having my name in there, like Ortega Jiménez lab or something like that. I prefer something that is more meaningful, like an Ornithopterus. I like that, no? And so that's the lab. And organismal dynamics is because you can see that I'm not just working with birds, but I'm working with all kinds of animals, like water striders, that when they are producing this Marangoni effect, no, that is produced in the wine, like the legs of the wine are produced like that, or these electrostatic effects on nematodes and insects, or these small crane flies that they stop flying and they are just controlling with their legs. So, and flamingos, of course.
Victor, I just want the audience to know I was not terribly rude when I interrupted him, because before we started, Victor acknowledged that he welcomes questions during the talk. So please feel free to raise your hands and fire away when you're called upon.
Yeah, please. So, and now let me tell you some highlights of my research in all these years. This is at UC Berkeley when I was a postdoc, and at that time I was interested in hummingbirds, how they fly in the rain. And this is the Tonight Show at that time. Maybe the sound, but they are describing the news, no? That we discover this new behavior of hummingbirds, but look what happened in there. And this is the comedian, and he's saying, oh, the hummingbirds are so fast that you cannot see the towel. And that was a very interesting remark, because I can explain to the audience that hummingbirds can fly, shake their bodies like dogs within mid-air, and they can solve a very fundamental problem of aerodynamics when they are flying in the rain. They are removing all the water droplets, you know, the extra water droplets. And so that was...
So they really do shake. I happen to have a dog, and I understand a dog shake. They have the muscles in their bodies that can shake their skin in the way a dog can?
They are shaking if you think in acceleration of gravity, if an airplane is flying at 6G, no, we just black out. But hummingbirds can shake an acceleration of 34 just by doing that. So they remove all the water droplets. And that's why I'm saying that this joke is very accurate, actually. No? You cannot see the towel. And so the other group that I've been working is with tiny organisms. These are springtails. And springtails are everywhere, are in the soil, no? But also there are some species that are semi-aquatic. They live on the surface of water. You can see here that we discover that when they are jumping, of course, they are rotating in the air like a flapping butterfly, no? But the interesting part is when they are landing, they are always landing on its feet. And what we discover is that when they are deforming the body, they are creating some aerodynamic forces to stop the rotation and just land like an acrobat, no? That they are. So. And of course, this is ongoing research on electrostatics, and you can see that nematodes, these are sub-millimeter organisms, but there is some group of nematodes that can jump. And the interesting part is that they parasite insects, like fruit flies or several insects. No? But if you think that electrostatics, no, can make your hair, if you are just rubbing a balloon with your hair, it can attract, no, your hair with a balloon. The same happens with a nematode. When it's jumping, and if the fruit fly is charged electrically, it can be attracted. This is the video to demonstrate what is happening. See? So the fly is charged, and the nematode is just jumping and is attracted electrically. So, and that changed the game, because we know that organisms are opportunistic, and in this case, nematodes are taking advantage, not just the aerodynamics, but of the electrostatics. But today, the star of the show are the flamingos. I'm going to talk about flamingos. Hopefully you can, when you live, you can see flamingos in different ways, no? Because one important part of being a scientist is to see through different glasses, no? And those glasses makes you appreciate nature or any phenomenon in different ways, no? And when you observe that, we want to share that through those glasses, no? And so the flamingos, today I'm going to talk about flamingos, vortex traps, and a little bit about the physics, no, in terms of fluid dynamics. So, but let me start with explaining what flamingos are, no, what they do, how they live. And we know that flamingos live in extreme environments, no? As I mentioned at the beginning, they live in hypersaline lakes. You can see them in super alkaline. So as I said, it's like a battery acid, no? If you touch those waters, you can burn your skin or your eyes. But are very toxic too, because a lot of bacteria are growing in there. And if you drink that water, you can become sick, very sick. But the other aspect is that they live in hot springs. So the water is almost a boiling point, and they are just fine. They are eating all the brine shrimp in there. And one of my surprises is that usually birds, you can call the group a flock. But for flamingos, you know what is the term used for a group of flamingos? Anyone? A flamboyance. So now if you see a group of flamingos, you can refer to that word. So the color pink, and the color pink, we eat a lot of carrots. If you eat every day for several weeks, you become red, no? And flamingos are doing the same thing, no? They are taking these dyes from the brine shrimp and bacteria, and all these dyes are getting to the feathers. They have another secret, because we believe that we invented the makeup, but it's not true. Flamingos also can make up, because they have a special glands that they produce also these colorants, and they are taking those colorants and they are putting in some special places, and so they can be more attractive. So they are artificially increasing their chances to be more attractive by doing these makeups. And in parental care, they are fantastic parents. So both parents participate. Not all birds are doing this. For example, in hummingbirds, just the female take care of the chicks, and the same for Oropendula montezuma. But in this case, in flamingos, both parents participate, and they also produce some kind of milk, like mammals. But this milk is a crop milk, no? It's produced in the crop, and it's red, very red. And sometimes people are mistaking that flamingos are feeding the chick, and they see all these red colors, you know, passing through the face of the chick, and the people say, oh, it's killing the small chick. No, it's feeding the chick. And the other is that they are fantastic architects. They are doing this beautiful nest, you know, just made of moth. And this is something also interesting, because I was expecting when I was in my first class of ornithologists, and the professors asked, what are the closest relatives of flamingos? And I was thinking, oh, of course, long-legged birds. No? But no, seems like are the grebes. No? I was also thinking in dogs, because they share some of the parasite lice. It's similar in flamingos and dogs. But also, that doesn't stand. So the genetics analysis indicates that are grebes, relative to grebes. So how many flamingo species exist today? One idea? 1, 2, just raise your hand and you say 3,
27.
4, 5, 6, 10. Okay, let's see. Just 6. But it's enough. From the lesser flamingo to the great flamingo, there is a long variation. The lesser flamingo is eating bacteria. So imagine filter particles the size of a bacteria. And the greater flamingo, they are eating more bigger prey. This is the distribution. You can see that they are, of course, around the Caribbean, Florida, South America, Africa, Asia, except in Australia and in the poles. But essentially, they are almost everywhere. But here is a surprising. This is eBird data. And the American flamingo, you can see all these dots of record, of these sites. And there is some sites actually in the Bay Area. You can see some dots in there. These are wild flamingos, no ones those that are escaping from zoos. So that's something interesting, how the distribution, maybe it will increase with the climate change. Maybe flamingos will switch a little bit to the north. Let's see what happens. So, but today I'm going to talk about filter feeding. And I'm going to start with this interesting and historical picture of Audubon. He drew this picture in the 1900s. But it seems very weird because flamingos doesn't look like that, when you are in the zoo. And so the question that Gould pointed out is why he put it like that. And it was because no other bird can do something like feeding upside down, and that's why this was a very weird drawing. And it's interesting because humans, we eat, and we are just moving the lower mandible, right? But for flamingos, because they have this weird behavior and posture, the mandibles have a reverse role. So the upper mandible became the lower mandible and vice versa. So, and that's why the upper mandible in here is moving all the time. So the same as us, And the beak is bent. And that's the other characteristic of flamingos. And that's why they are, the characteristic posture of flamingos is that they are feeding with their heads upside down. This is the classic. I hope Audubon can maybe he observed the flamingos, or maybe it was just from a museum. That's why he get this idea of flamingos having the head like that. But anyway, but they have also this amazing muscle, the tongue, and the Romans, they consider this tongue a delicacy. So they were recipes of flamingos' tongues in all the Roman Empire. So, but you can see all these muscles, and maybe for the Roman was tasty, but for the biologists it's a pump. They consider that this was the actual mechanism of pumping water in and out. And that was in the 90s and the 60s, the theory said that the flamingo's tongue is a piston. And that was the idea. Flamingos are feeding like that because they have this massive tongue that acts like a piston. And they have, of course, all these filters along the beak, they call lamella. And depending on the species, these filters can trap particles the size of a cell, as I said, some flamingos, or others can trap bigger prey. So the idea of flamingos at that point, when I was reading all my lectures of flamingos, is just we know about flamingos that are a tongue, they have filters, and they eat upside down. You know? But what was the observation? So, and that was interesting because I consider myself a Darwinian naturalist. So, and when we went to a visit to the Zoo Atlanta in 2019, just before the pandemic, it was with my family, Sarah and Ashley, my daughter, and I was at that time a postdoc in Kansas State University. And I observed these flamingos, no, in that day of the zoo. But this was that trapped my attention. You can see these beautiful capillary waves that are at the interface happening. And the question to me that I was just involved in fluid dynamics is what is happening inside? What is the mystery that flamingos are hiding in there? No? What is happening with their feet, with their tongue, with their motion of their mandibles, with this long neck? No? What is happening inside of the water? So that was the question that trapped me, no? Like some kind of vortex. And so, and the questions were very simple. So which vertical structures are produced by flamingos? And what role do those perturbations play in food intake? So those were very simple questions. And those questions, imagine, 2019, and the paper was just published some maybe weeks ago, so more than 5 years ago. And so we discovered 4 mechanisms, and I will just start with the first. And so, and the first observation in the zoo is that flamingos are actually retracting their head from the water frequently. And by doing that, we observe this in just putting some particles. These are food particles, and the flamingo you're observing feeding. And you can see those vortices that are appearing like small tornadoes. And so we know that tornadoes are very destructive, but they are very effective to lift all the particles from the ground. And so, and one of this is a video of how I'm encourage flamingos to feed in the container. So there is a small food like a shrimp, and so they are feeding. This is a slow motion video. You can see when they are retracting the head. There is a tornado in there. And the interesting part is that they are returning again in these tornadoes. No? And you can see that. So, and these are some of the pictures. So everything happens in 200 milliseconds, so in a blink of an eye. And you can see the structure that is appearing in there. But the question is produced. There is many things that are happening here because flamingos are moving the tongue and the mandibles are opening and closing, and also the head is retracting. So the question is, what is producing those tornadoes? No? And the simple approach is to reconstruct the head. So, and I just took some pictures of this specimen donated by the Atlanta Zoo. And you can see that it's just pictures. You take pictures even with your phone, and you can reconstruct the head. And so once we do the reconstruction, we made the experiment just pulling the head out and see what happened when we are just pulling this 3D reconstruction. And it's not just one vortex, but are appearing 3 vortices. And all are lifting all these particles and concentrated the food particles in just one spot. Then we did the experiment again, but now with brine shrimp. And you can see the brine shrimp is alive. You can see that all these shrimps is concentrated again in these vortices. No, they are trapped in there. And so this experiment, this very simple experiment, is just explaining that the pulling of the head without anything else, anything more complex, is producing these structures.
Excuse me. Is the purpose of that to be able to get the food easier?
Yeah, one of the ideas is that all these animals are in the bottom, so they are, just by producing these tornadoes concentrated in this vortex, they are exposed. So when they are returning, they are more likely to get them, you know, and feed on them. The second mechanism that we discovered is the chattering, and by chattering I mean when they are opening and closing the mandibles. This is me several years ago. Let's wait. And so this is the Nashville Zoo, and this is the setup. So you can see that that looks like some kind of very strange setup, but in that box that says laser, there is a powerful laser. That is, this water is green because that laser. There is a small tank. There is a high-speed camera, the computer, and we are just waiting for the flamingo to feed in those waters. No? And there is some small bubbles and food particles to visualize, because the laser is not a volume, but it's just a sheet of laser that is just illuminating those particles that are in display.
Victor?
Yes.
Does the flamingo recognize the red carpet and know it's supposed to stand there?
Yeah, the red carpet is artificial. I just pointed out that they need to be there. Yeah, but for the flamingos to be trained to feed in that container, it took 6 months. Yeah, so it was not that easy. And we returned several times until they finally did this. And so we were really happy to see this. And this is very amazing what the flamingos are doing, because if you think in the tongue, in the theory that it's just a piston that is pumping water in and out, we're expecting that the water is coming in and out. But in this case, all has some directionality. All the flow is just getting to the beak. And the question is why? Why is not the tongue producing flow in and out? But in this case, we are seeing just a direction. So what is happening in there?
Victor?
Mm-hmm.
Do we know whether the flamingo swallows at least a little water with each of the chatter motions?
No, they don't drink the water. They can drink water, but when they are filter feeding, they are just expulsing and putting water in and out, but there is no water intake. That's the interesting part in there. And why they are not doing that? Because it's toxic water. Remember this hypersaline, very alkaline. So when they want to drink water, they go to other sources of clean water and they drink the water.
But the flow of evident in the screen there, the flow of the particles, maybe the shrimp, just seemed as if they were drinking them up. But you're saying no, they created tornadoes, vortices that bring them up.
Yeah, in this case, they are producing some asymmetry in the beak. So as I said, in this case, the flamingos are clapping their beaks, opening and closing. But the thing is that if you are clapping your hands, you have some asymmetry, right? Because if you are measuring the flow around, if you average, the velocity of the flow will be zero, because the same amount is entering and is getting out. But in the case of the flamingos, one mandible is fixed and the other is clapping. And that is producing the asymmetry. And that's why the flow is getting in one direction. And to demonstrate that, we take some of the engineers and some of the mechanics of this flamingo beak, and you can see this is a real flamingo beak, but it's just with some actuator. So we are putting a motor there, and it's just clapping. This is a slow motion. You can see here that there is the same directionality. So which means that the tongue is not producing that directionality, but it's just the clapping of the beak.
What about the filter?
Yeah, the filter is important for capturing the particles and the tongue. But in this case, we are just trying to demonstrate that the clapping of the beak is producing that directionality of the flow that we observe in the real flamingos.
And how does it get from the
Yeah, in this case, the flow, because it's getting to the beak, the amount of food increases by time. If it's just the tongue that is producing this, actually, if it's just producing water in and out, the mechanisms will be not effective, because all the flow will be just recirculating without nothing putting inside, no? But in this case, the clapping is producing all this attraction to particles of food, no? But let me show you what happened. This is a blender simulation. So you just saw some of the movie Flow was made in Blender. So I'm just putting some of this animation just to see the clapping. This is a mechanical, again, a beak. It's just actuating like that, it's clapping. You can see all the shrimp is getting in one direction. But the important part is to demonstrate that there is some capture, no? How this clapping is increasing the capture rate in shrimp. So one of the experiments I was imagining is, you can see here, there is a tube. Oh, okay, there is a tube in here, and there is a pump. So the pump is putting flow inside of this tube, and is getting outside of this aquarium, and it's getting in this direction. So, and I was imagining, okay, if the pump is just making some flow constant, no, we can measure the amount of prey that is passing here, in this case the shrimp. But what happens if we now put the pump and the chattering at the same time? Like you can see here what is happening. And here I can count the number of shrimps that are passing through. And so this is with the pump only. You can see that there is no chattering. And this is with the pump plus chattering. And you can see evidently it's passing more shrimp by time. And so if we plot the cumulative shrimp number by time, you can see that the pump plus chattering increases the capture 7 times. So the chattering is fundamental for flamingos to capture more prey. It is not the tongue. And so I always make this joke about flamingos that they have bad manners because they are feeding with their feet. And you can see why. And usually you can see flamingos doing this behavior, and kids are fascinated by this behavior, not because it seems like they are just marching or dancing. But the question is, what is happening with the feet? Is involved with the feeding? And this is at the edge of the pond. But look what happened in shallow waters. So they are doing everything at the same time. They are retracting the head, as I was explaining in the first mechanism. They are placing the head in front of the feet, and they are marching. So what is happening with the feet? So to answer again this question is to produce a mechanical foot. In here you can see that it's opening and closing, and it's opening just passively like a parachute, and it's getting, when it's stepping, and when it's getting up, it's closing automatically, like flamingos do. So here you can see something interesting. When they are stepping, they are producing a vortex that remains in there. So if you imagine if they are placing the head exactly in that vortex, all the food is recirculating in the head. So and that's why with this experiment we demonstrate that they are producing this vortex, these traps that are fundamental for feeding too. And here is some of the what is happening with the flow. This is and as I was explaining, if the flamingo is putting the head exactly in this recirculation vortex, they are having the food just right there. So to demonstrate that also happens with the brine shrimp, this is alive. You can see the vortex. And of course, that was in 2D, no? But we wanted to understand what happened with the vortex in 3D, and so it took a lot for TNG in KSU. He's the specialist in computational fluid dynamics, and you can see that these beautiful vortices that are happening in 3D. It's not just a donut, but it's like some complex two donuts, no, that are happening in there. But we made some experiments with a rigid foot, and a rigid foot is just producing turbulence. So there is no a very coherent vortex in front of the foot, because it's producing also structures at the top. So if flamingos are having the rigid foot, just putting like that, they will have not any advantage, because some of the foot will be far away from the head, no? And it's not just in front of the foot, like this morphing foot that I showed you before. And this is the last mechanism. And this is a very strange way to feed at the interface. And I will tell you why. So usually, if you're thinking in filter feeding animals like this whale, usually they are moving, no, forward, and they are just filtering all the incoming flow. So it makes sense, because you just need to open your mouth wide, and all the flow is getting to your mouth. And that's simple fluid dynamics, no? But look what happened with flamingos. So they are moving forward, but the beak is pointing downstream. So it's opposite that what you expected. And my question was, why flamingos are not flipping the head, opening the beak wide open, and just filtering like whales? So this, again, we did these experiments in the lab of TNG. There is a flume here, so we can control the flow. And there is a 3D model there, the laser, the cameras. You can see Pankaj Rohija that he's trying to put some of the particles in there. So it's a teamwork, no, all these experiments. And here is the beauty of fluid dynamics. You can see all these beautiful vortices that are appearing. This is a top view. Not like flamingos, it's like flamingos are moving in that direction. So, and the flow is going in that direction. You can see at in the tip of the beak that all the particles are collected in a recirculation zone. And that's fundamental, because even when the flamingos are moving in the opposite direction, you can see that the flow is doing the same as the whale. So it's moving directly to the beak. You can see the particles in there. But even when the main flow is going in this direction, the flow in the recirculation zone is getting to the beak, just because these vortices. And these are some of the 3D reconstructions and the fluid dynamics. And you can see that the recirculation zone extends beyond the head. And so in summary, you can say that these 4 discoveries are fundamental for flamingos in the way that the chattering is producing some directional flow. So just opening and closing the mandibles produce this directional flow. The head motion is producing these tornado-like vortices that are lifting all the particles and concentrating in these structures, fluid structures. The skimming, also they are taking advantage of the recirculation zone on they call this kind of structure von Karman vortex. So, and they are using, again, vortices to capture their food. And finally, the stomping. No? All this marching that they are producing the flamingos, they are producing also these vortices. So what we are saying with all these findings is that flamingos are specialized predators, that they are using actively vortex traps, with their feet, with their head, with the chattering mandibles, with this long neck. All flamingos are designed for filter feeding. And just for taking that prey, the brine shrimp, in the case of the Chilean flamingo. So one of the questions is, then how did flamingos evolve? And there is some fossils, you can see in the middle. This is one of the fossils that we know that flamingos were the more closest relatives. And they have this, like a massive beak, no, but it's not bended. And also some of more modern relative, the podiceps, those are the gryphs, and the flamingos, no, that they have the bended beak. But one interesting part to answer maybe these questions instead of the fossils is actually looking at the chicks. You can see that the chicks, they don't have the beak bended. So they start their life with a beak like a grip. So and one of the questions is how do they transition their feeding strategies? And I think studying how flamingos from the chick to juveniles to adults, we can understand how those transitions happen, no? At least in this sense, no, of feeding. And of course, we are trying to take advantage of this knowledge and thinking in some bioinspiration, no? How to apply this knowledge to make some filtration systems. Because flamingos don't clog. So if you make a coffee in the morning, you put your filter, you cannot reuse the filter for the second coffee, no? Because all the pores just are clogged. But flamingos don't clog, even they can feed in the mud, no? So if we can take advantage of that vertical structures that they are producing, we can apply to reduce the microplastic in the ocean. Or also you can think in some of these algae blooms, no, that are toxic. And we can remove all those using some of these filter systems. So I want to acknowledge all these institutions, the Zoo Atlanta, the Nashville Zoo, Georgia Tech, Kansas State University, the University of Maine, and of course Berkeley, for all this support during all these years, no? And also the collaboration of all these great institutions and people. And so if you have questions, yeah, just let me know. Thank you.
Quick question. So you were saying there were 6 kind of flamingos. I would love to see that slide again. I was trying to read it. I was in Corsica and there were wild flamingos living on a lagoon. And I was wondering, do you know what kind those would have been? Would they have been African or indigenous to the Mediterranean islands?
Yeah, I don't know the flamingos that you are mentioning, because some can escape from zoos, and depending on those flamingos that are in the zoos, but if it's a wild flamingo, it depends of the geographic region of those flamingos.
They're wild. They're on the island of Corsica in the Mediterranean.
Oh, okay.
They're above Africa.
Yeah, it could be a gray flamingo. Yeah, but I think the gray flamingos are around there, but not sure, as I said, depending if.
They're not few.
Yeah.
Do flamingos mate for life?
They could, yeah, they could, but usually, as many birds, they have fidelity during each year, no? But you can think in that mating. But there is some data that they can mate for longer, like at 5 years, but it's not sure if it's for life. Because usually birds, you know, especially in flamingos, they are in huge flocks. So usually they just have fidelity by year, no? But not for life. Yep.
As impressive as the capture of food is that the flamingo can achieve, isn't also the ability to swallow that distance upside down? Isn't that, they must have very extensive muscle systems in their necks.
Yeah, that's an interesting question to answer for the future, because we were thinking that one of the mysteries that are around flamingos is inside of the beak. And as all this research is outside of the beak. So one of the plans is with people from the University of Washington, that they are experts in tongue, like a biomechanics. We can try to understand what is happening with the fluid dynamics of the tongue, the fluid inside, the lamellas, but inside the beak. But the problem is, how can we make the beak transparent? Or some model that is transparent to see through, or some particles that are we can measure something. So we are still thinking how to do that, but it's a challenge. But it's a very interesting question, no? And what is happening inside of all these muscles also is an open question, but it's an interesting one. Yes.
Are there other birds that are filter feeders?
Yeah, the dogs. You know, dogs are specialists in filter feeding. You can think also, in general, I think dogs are some of the most fantastic filter feeders. There is the shovelers, that they have beautiful lamellas, actually more packed and dense than flamingos, and they are in the ocean. So there is this mystery if they are using also these vortices, no? But we don't know. No? All dogs, geese, they are also chattering. And so it's an open question. Are flamingos similar than dogs producing vortices or no? So yeah, could be interesting to explore that.
I was just wondering if you found any evidence of flamingos ingesting microplastics.
I don't have any research. Yeah. So if there is any evidence that flamingos are eating the microplastic, I know that many other fish, you know, and some marine animals, there is evidence that they are ingesting. Actually, there is some data that we have microplastic in our brains, no? But flamingos, I don't have any literature related with microplastic, but they may, no? Because microplastic is a huge problem everywhere. No? Yeah.
You're talking about the filters don't clog, and then for a whale, how does the whale, does the whale use different mechanisms for unclogging the filter, like noise or something, because the whale can't sort of reach or as frequently?
Yes, so the question is if whales also they have these lamellas, no? They have these lamellas, and if they have this no clogging mechanism like flamingos. But the answer is depends of the whale, because there is a huge diversity of whales, and the ones that resemble flamingos because they have the mandibles bended are the right whales. And these right whales, there is just one paper that they said that there is some evidence that when they return from the bottom of the sea, they have mud in their faces. So, and the question is, are they doing the same thing like the same mechanism than flamingos? We don't know, but it could be interesting to explore if whales, that there is several stories that they resemble flamingos and these right whales. They are doing the same mechanism. This convergence in shape actually is functional or no? But it's an interesting question. Yes.
Getting back to what Tucker was saying about them getting the food all the way up, do they pick their heads up fairly often, or it's on the upside down for a long time?
Yeah, they can feed for some minutes, but always they need to breathe. So that's why also they are retracting the head. But usually, as you can see in some of the videos, they are retracting the head to produce those structures, and seems like it's not for breathing, no.
So are they like collecting food maybe in their head, and then when they pick up, it all comes down?
I think they cannot scoop food with the beak, because the beak looks like more like a boat shape, and it's not like a scoop. If it was like a scoop, could be possible that mechanism, but because it's different, like as I said, like a boat shape, it's impossible the particles to collect in there. But I think the retracting of the head is more to collect in these vortices the food, and they are returning to the same spot. Yeah.
Do you know of any other birds that do the stomping routine?
No, as far as I know, flamingos maybe are some of the unique that are doing this, because also they are the unique that can feed upside down. Right. So maybe, yeah, I don't know. But there is some, like egrets, that they are just moving like that, very, very calm.
They don't do the
Yeah, but they are not doing like the crazy dancing, yeah, the stomping dance. Yeah, I don't know. But there is some birds, the phalaropes, that they can swim in circles at the interface, and by doing that, they are producing also a vortex. But turns out that these phalaropes feed close to the flamingos. And one study says that when they are feeding close to the flamingos, they can take more prey. So they are taking advantage of those vortices of flamingos somehow. You know? So they are very, as I said, animals are opportunistic. If you have the chance to other makes your job, why not?
I've been hearing a lot about science funding from the government being cut. What is your personal experience with that? What are you seeing, and is it impacting your work?
Yeah, now I have just 1 year, and I'm applying to some grants. But I don't have that by now, that experience, because some of the grants that I'm applying are private, so those are not touched by the government. But there is so many people in Berkeley that they have these cuts, and that means that they are not continuing some of basic research like this, or funding students, no, like a PhD students, and some people are just reducing the number of members in their labs. So it's a dramatic situation for many labs. Because I'm starting, I have also a startup, so the university gave me some money for the research, so I have my money there. That is not because of the government, but I think in the future I will feel those effects. Yeah, it's dramatic.
As beautiful as flamingos are individually, I think we got to agree that collectively, as a flamboyance of flamingos, they're even more beautiful. And so I wonder if our flamingo expert will forgive us if maybe we start adopting that name for wondernauts. We are a flamboyance of wondernauts. And please join me in a great round of applause for the flamboyant and highly knowledgeable Dr. Victor Ortega Jiménez.